back at when my teddies disappeared. But all this time, now Michael he and his first wife had divorced, that's okay, but he had an affair with a woman and a child, a secretary. So he was having an affair with a woman. I mean, Michael is both ways, you know what I mean? But in order to get into the system, he sort of did it with my husband. He was my husband's friend, younger friend. And that started when he was in the 7th Fleet under Krulak and Buell in intelligence on the ship. So, but Michael, there he was at Little Creek, my husband's best friend. He never invited him over, but he saw him. So I don't know if you can guess what that means. But the teams, the biological electronic warfare school that after my husband left FMF Lant, he went to the school, you know, the Special Operations School, which ran the teams, foreigners, and everywhere.
Okay, now the term MAC-SOG, what does that mean? What is that?
It was a kind of a code word for going out and sending platoons to kill people in Vietnam. SOG is Special Operations Group. Special Operations, SO, SS, OSS, Secret Service, SS, Nazi, Spetsnaz, the German stormtroopers. They all, if you know anything about the German High Command, it's the Brotherhood. It's called, they are connected with the Opus Dei, which is an Italian kind of a business group that works within the Vatican. And I'm told that, and I like the Pope, I think he's a wonderful guy, but I'm told that he was involved with that during World War II.
I've heard that too.
And that the guy who was the Pope before was murdered so that he could get in.
Now I'm still curious about the SEALs in this murder thing.
Are we still on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now a SEAL, in order to complete his indoctrination, becoming a, quote, full-fledged SEAL, part of that includes the fact he has to have killed somebody.
Yeah.
All right, and it could
SEAL
be
Team 6, right, the red team.
Red team.
The Ghetto was the captain of that team, and his wife and I had wonderful conversation.
And would she confirm this as well? I mean, did she confirm this
I
with
guess
you?
she would. She's scared. She's frightened. Most of these women are scared to death because they're warned. They know what happened to Sue Griggs.
Okay, so
They
but they
know.
support you. I mean,
Yeah.
philosophically, in their
Yeah.
hearts at least,
Oh,
if
yeah.
not with their lips.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
they
yeah.
s-
We talk about it. Some of them have to go out of their house. Some of them won't even talk in the office in which they work. They've had men come by their houses. They've had their papers stolen.
I mean, association with
They're-
you could be the kiss of death.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And they know that. But we talk anyway. And you're talking about some really brave women here. And when I talked to, there are a couple of colonels' wives, and before I went public, you know, they were talking to me, except for Carolyn Millis was just, she turned just like that. She was the one whose house I was in when I told about the go-go dancers in the officers club and me taking the picture and thinking about writing the letter to the wives. And she said, "Oh, you can't do that. You'll ruin George's career." In other words, Carolyn has really bought into the system, and she's very pretty, and she's very influential with the wives group, but she'll turn on you in a second. And it really hurt me because I was, you know, I kind of depended on her and Charlotte Moore. But when I went public, when I started telling people what I knew little bit by little bit just to get my courage, and then when I finally went to visit Sarah McClendon, it was like, you see, I told you. I mean, Sarah McClendon called my house, and they told her it was an army base. I mean, it was a military base, and that the Griggses didn't live there anymore.
The
Ha ha
not
ha!
too,
See this
loud in the
paper?
background.
You know. Then I was totally shut off. But until that point, I went in to see Peggy Sheehan. You know, we had tea and food, and he was the head of NATO SACLAN, and his wife Peggy said, "Just Kay, this is so strange." She said, "Just leave a note on your refrigerator. Yeah, for George. Just leave a note on your refrigerator."
Meaning?
I don't, just, in other words, he's coming in the house, they're coming in the house, it'll get to George. This is SOP, standard operating procedure. You know, just get used to it, used to being battered, used to being...
Well, she was a worshiper of the security of the position, the money and everything, and just don't rock the boat because this is the way it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And we don't want it any differently.
No.
I mean, they could
If
desire
you
it
have
more.
to divorce your husband, then, you know, that's just the way it is. But it's cold calculating.
Yeah, I just
And
want
yet
to blast you with
so
the sound of the wind.
Un-American. So un-American. I mean, I know what Americans like because everybody in my family were, you know, World War II. My brother was a briefer for the SACLAN staff. He went on to be a medical doctor. You know, I mean, this is not, of course he got out as soon as he could.
Well, you know, people who love this country and love its history, I mean, are just completely confused.
Yeah.
From cab drivers to
Yeah.
bartenders. I mean, nobody can figure out what's going on. Why is it everything goes the wrong direction?
You know what I say? When I started this, it was like maybe a 2,000-piece puzzle. I know enough. It's like a puzzle for a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old with 6 pieces. It's so easy to see. And everybody who talks to me sees it the same way.
And the 2.5-year-old child had 10 shallow ice pick wounds in her chest in the form of an S. I asked Helena, I said, "Helena, what did that S stand for?" And she said, "Satanism." So this was a shock to me. The McDonald case, this man's in jail. I couldn't understand it. I went on national television, a number of national TV shows. I debated Freddie Kassab, the father-in-law, on CNN. And also a psychiatrist was there. And I talked about this satanic aspect. And I had people calling me from all over the country, telling me the same basic story, from the East Coast, the West Coast, North and South. And I had people that, what you'd call them multi-generation Satanists. That's somebody who was born into it, mother, father, grandfather, grandmother are involved in Satanism. And adult survivors, that's somebody that gets out, usually has to go into hiding to survive. I had these people calling me from all over the country telling me about the ceremonies and about the extent of the satanic movement in this country today. So I started investigating it myself. I gave a number of lectures on it. I had some national exposure, of course. And the bottom line is it's very easily explained. And it fits into a pattern. And this goes back some 200 years. I'm going to use as a textbook tonight Pawns in the Game. It's a book that was written by William Guy Carr. He was a retired commander in the Canadian Naval Force. And he had heard about the conspiracy and wanted
How do you
to
end
delve
up
into
at
it
one of
himself.
these conventions?
He wrote a very compact
I feel
book
like you have to, like,
about what's going on with the
make
Illuminati
a
and
friend
how this
group
fits into
to find out
modern
about
day
this stuff.
plans, what's going on in the world today. So we're going to use that as a textbook for the first 2 hours, and the second 2 hours we'll have some case studies.
I'm sort of an interpreter. I kind of give a lot of the wives hope, and the guys too, who are already out and scared, and
I feel like
you
that's
know, and
every
they
church.
say, "Hey, well, this little woman, she's a real feisty, you know what?" And I don't know whether they're going to kill her, what they're going to do, and they say, "Aren't you afraid?" And I say, "Yes." I mean, I've had death threats, and I mean, it's been hell. But truth and light and what these other women are going through, the hell they're going through, being put through hell because their husbands are cowards and bullies. I mean, people who dress up in black, who hide behind trees, who shoot people from behind, who break into houses and steal their papers. This is in the Constitution. You don't break into someone's home. You don't steal their papers. You don't try to destroy the core that God has given them when they're born. Mothers have sons, and their sons are 18 years old, and they were telling them, join the Marine Corps to be a man? It's not a man. It's not a man who does this. It's a pervert. That's why they're not joining up anymore. That's why they're not signing up. They're having problems with retention because the mothers are finding out. McVeigh's mothers talked. Unabomber's mothers and brothers have talked, you know.
When my mom said don't
Guys
join
like
the
Colonel
military, it
Ron
had nothing
Ray
to
is
do with
talking.
being
Who
gay.
was,
I think that would be the least of her concerns.
Timothy, what's his the new boy who refused to wear the UN uniform?
Oh, Michael New.
Michael New.
Yeah.
These are the heroes. Michael New is a MacArthur. Randy Hebert is the future Patton. These are the leaders. These are the Americans, and there are a lot of them. There are hundreds of thousands of them.
Although my mom
And
is the same person
just like
that
in the days of Jesus
when
Christ,
I was a kid
these
wouldn't let me
modern
eat
day
chicken
Sadducees and
because she didn't,
Pharisees are saying,
and I
"Oh,
quote,
we're going to kill
didn't want
Jesus.
me to grow tits
We're going
like
to
the
get rid
Puerto
of
Rican
MacArthur.
boys
We're going to
because
get rid
of
of
the
Patton.
hormones."
We're going to get rid of New. We're going to get rid of Colonel Sabo, murdered him. We're going to get rid of these guys one by hey, but everyone, this is physics. Everyone, like Sue Griggs, that's murdered, Sabo, who's murdered, the wives who were murdered, Ron Brown. There are 100 people who spring up and say, now you got me to worry about. This is why these guys have got little places hidden all over the place. They're training all the guys to just say, oh, well, the American citizens are bad. But the guys they're training are also gonna wake up to what's going on. It's Caspar Weinberger. It's Henry Kissinger. I mean, Walt Whitman Rostow. Eugene Debs Rostow.
All of those names seem
What's going
a little
on
bit
here?
Jewish.
These guys aren't even born in America. What's happening here? They're training mercenaries now to run, flip around. We'll kill on an order. Not killing because people are breaking into our homes. Not killing because they're bad. But just, we want to control this country. That's what George told me. It's political. The military, the Marine Corps is a political arm of a group that wants to run everything, control the drugs, sell the weapons, keep the weapons flow going, and this isn't what guys are going to sign up to do. Their heart's not in it. They're not going to even do it for the money. They'd rather die than have hit squads come after them, collection groups from Great Lakes. They have a group of Marines who goes out and collects guys who have gone to their psychiatrist and they're a little bit talking too much. They get rid of them. But they're not told why. They're just told they're enemies or they've done bad things. So they don't, it's kind of like they don't, so they won't have any guilt and culpability. They make it cold. Just get rid of this guy, okay? Okay, get a promotion, get a new car, get some stock. After my husband did what he did in Beirut, I found these stubs. He got all this stock. You know, AT&T,
I guess I used to think that the world was
major
run
stock,
by pedophiles,
just
but now I'm
thousands of
realizing it's
dollars
just
worth of stock.
a bunch of guys that want to suck each other
And
off.
it was from a company that was like a quasi-government company, all on a sheet of paper. And of course it was big time stock. And that's how he was paid off. Stock.
And paid off for?
For doing criminal activities, selling weapons, going through Tel Aviv, the bank in Rome, selling the weapons illegally. The Israeli agents are the middlemen. And all the money's going to Israel. I mean, it really is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
The money, not just the money that is given to them free and clear,
That's anti-Semitic.
but all the black budget money that Meyer Lansky's group started back in the 40s has been growing and growing and growing. It's like a pyramid scheme. And the Jesuits, I've been told, are really controlled by this group now. I don't,
Now surely Ollie North is a good guy.
No, I think he was farmed. He was, but see, Ollie was involved in Vietnam with the JAGs, covering up a lot of the stuff that was going on. He was involved with a major case where there was a Marine, George told me about this. See, George was involved with a lot of the cover-ups of Marines who went crazy. Like, remember this, A Few Good Men, was it A Few Good Men? It was a movie about a Marine colonel. They murdered a guy from, Jack Nicholson played the colonel in this movie.
You can't
you
handle
remember?
this dick.
He went on trial.
Yes.
And a
George
good guy
was the chief of
prosecuted.
staff who tried to cover this up. My husband,
The true story.
the true story. My husband was the guy who was covering this up. They were so arrogant. And it was the woman who was the JAG who got this thing going. It was not the Navy JAG, because he was going to cover it up. He was just a loose kind of guy. And if he had been the JAG, then it wouldn't have been prosecuted. But it was the woman who was working with him, because she was a woman, who got these other guys off. They were targeting these other guys. I mean, they would have put him in jail just for a little bit and, let him out. But the point is, this guy was murdered. And the colonel laughed it off. It was down there in Guantanamo Bay. And George was the chief. It was Al Gray. Al Gray. That was, just that one alone. And Lone Tree, they were involved with that. Because see, it's just so sick. I mean, they are so easy.
Let's break.
Okay.
I'll tell you. This has been a tremendous.
Can you imagine
I'm gonna
being
let you
this
take
guy
this
and just sitting
home
there and
read
hearing all this
letter.
shit?
Or did you take the letter?
Especially if
You
he's
got the
not
letter.
from
Okay.
this, like,
Take
this
this and
air-
put
like
the
this
letter in
world.
there, because you'll see the glasses in there. That's.
Okay.
Bless your heart for sitting through all this. I'm sorry.
I couldn't stay down very long because I could hear a little bit.
Okay, everything is rolling?
Is this been recorded?
Yep, the red light's on. Okay, let's say a word of prayer. Lord Jesus, We're thankful for this day and opportunity to do your service. Lord, you said you should know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's what we're interested in accomplishing here today, in Jesus' name. What we're going to do, we're just going to record a bunch of stuff here, and we can do some more tomorrow. If we forget something today, it doesn't matter, we can put it in. If you think of something in 20 minutes that should have been said right up front, it doesn't matter.
Great.
We are simply wanting to reduce this down to tape so that it doesn't get lost.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
And the big job lays ahead. That's the editing. Okay? So I want you to completely relax. There is nothing that can't be done, redone. If we sneeze, if we cough, if, anything can
That's
be fixed.
reassuring.
If the ceiling caves in, all we do is clean up the mess and keep going.
Okay.
So everything here is real laid back. You've got a lot of information, and we want to get this down into a storyline, because I think what you've got here is something that is extremely important for people to know about.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about you and see now where'd you start out your life? You were born and raised in the country?
Yeah,
the city?
I was raised on a farm. In fact, I live in the same neighborhood in which I grew up. It was my grandfather's farm. Part of it was divided into thirds. But in 1939, my grandfather was an obstetrician in Norfolk. He was also in the Naval Reserves. He was in charge of military intelligence in Norfolk, which is the largest military naval complex in the world. So I was born in the Naval Hospital, which was the NATO headquarters, and brought home to my grandparents' farm. My father was in the South China Seas on a naval vessel. My uncle was in the Navy. So I come from a long line of military civilian folks. They were not full time military individuals. They had jobs, and they would go into the war. They would be in reserves, and as my grandfather was, he stayed in and retired a Navy captain. But I live in a house that was in part of my grandfather's field. And,
is that right?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
But I'm being strangled financially by this Army intelligence group, JAG group, that my husband.
Now, JAG, is that JAG?
JAG, Judge Advocate General. I think American citizens do not realize how many JAGs are in our court system, and they take orders. They are in the chain of command, they're active reserve, and they are in our court system everywhere you look.
Not just federal, state and local?
Everywhere, yeah. And they're going to meetings once a month, and if there is a case like many of the military intelligence wives like myself, and we have information that would come out in a divorce hearing or whatever, they totally control it. It is Judge John Moore in my case in Virginia Beach is an Army Ranger. He is active reserve. He's a VMI Army colonel. He's a graduate of VMI. In Virginia Beach, in the courts, there are at least 6 judges, and I'm including commissioners in that, because in Virginia we have a system where the commissioners do a lot of the decisions, and all of these in Virginia Beach who take care of military wives are military judges.
No, you mentioned the term VMI. What is that?
Well, VMI is Virginia Military Institute, and it's where General Marshall, the Marshall Plan, went to school. It's a little West Point. There's a lot of tradition there, but it's based on the Greek sort of Spartan military concept. And my father went to Washington and Lee, which is also in Lexington. And I know that there is some sort of, I won't say cult, but there probably is some sort of
Club?
secret society.
Okay.
And so it's
You know, I probably freak out a lot of people with the stuff that I talk about in my personal life. But some guy was just telling me that he met somebody, started moving up in the world, and they brought him into a room, and they were literally wearing cloaks and shit, and wanted him to like perform rituals. And like, this is a guy that like wouldn't really like joke with that stuff. It's really bizarre to actually like hear that actually happening.
very, very tight click. But
No, I'm scratching
what I was
'cause I'm
trying to
getting
say
bit
is
up
that
by
the
fucking
judges
mosquitoes
are
and no-see-ums.
military men, and they're not independent. They take
They
orders.
take orders.
There's a chain of command, and in my particular case,
I'm sitting on the dock at our house in the intercoastal, and there's fucking bugs biting the shit out of me. Got fucking dolphins floating by me and splashing and shit.
and the other 11 military wives whom I have met so far, there are many, many more, but they've all been handled the same way.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a normal divorce at all.
You know, I've heard of these kind of situations before, but it's never been put so concisely and so reasonably that there would be a connection. Why some people just, no matter what attorney you have, it doesn't matter.
Oh, no.
The divorces and the settlements of assets never go the right way.
No, and there's a FISA court, which I know is involved in my case.
What kind of court?
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's a Justice Department secret court that American citizens are not aware of. There have been a couple of articles on it. It's a small group of men, and I think there's a woman on it. I believe there's 7 justices. And in reality, the article that I read, which was given to me by Mike Fuller, and I know he would not mind me using his name, he's a government assassin. He was like my husband, a government assassin who did...
When you say assassin, you're talking like character assassination or kill people?
No, killing people.
Okay.
He's a mercenary, government mercenary.
Okay.
He was in Afghanistan and in Rhodesia, South Africa. And I met him and his wife through Sarah McClendon. He's a real wonderful patriot who is speaking out about what the NATO community and the Army and Marine Corps are doing.
And Sarah McClendon, she's an old warhorse, isn't she?
Sarah saved my life, literally.
Really?
Yeah. I had been having break-ins starting the night of March the 4th, after I was calling everywhere to see if I could find my husband. He would, disappear at times. And I found my husband's diary, which I have.
Do you know how surreal that's got to be, that your husband is going and disappearing, and it's to go and fuck boys with Albert Einstein? Just really try to process that. And she stayed.
Have here, which they have been not anxious to have get out.
Uh-huh. No, they meaning?
General Sheehan, General Krulak, Marine Corps colonels, generals, Al Gray, Cook, and especially General Joy.
Joy.
General Jim Joy
Uh-huh.
and General Carl Steiner they're evil men. And they are in this diary meeting with my husband almost every day in Beirut. They trained the men in black who killed those people in Waco. It was General Joy and General Steiner. Steiner's army, dirty tricks, special operations. And this is what my husband does for a living, is train mercenaries, young boys from countries like Romania, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, all these countries. They're training them to be murderers. And the taxpayers' dollars are paying for this.
Okay, now they train them just through the normal channels of the military. These kids join the Army or the Marine Corps, and then they select these kids based on some criteria to train them?
They psychologically profile them. The profile, which is similar to my husband's and Lee Harvey Oswald's and McVeigh's and some of the others who were all part of this program. Jeffrey Dahmler was profiled and hidden. You know, what most Americans do not know is that all of these men were
Jeffrey
Army.
Dahmer, he has a military background?
Of course, they're all Army.
Oh, okay.
They were all picked out because they're perverted or twisted.
Oh,
Yeah,
sexually perverted.
sexually perverted and therefore, you know.
Yeah.
Well, now I don't think McVeigh was perverted the way Dahmler was, but certainly the group that my husband is overseeing are twisted.
So part of the criteria, they look for people who have got something in their history that gives them a weird bend.
Yeah.
Like they were molested when they were a child,
Yeah.
or they come from dysfunctional families, abuse, whatever.
Strong mother, weak father, no father, poor. Because these guys are looking for security, so they will stay in the military and do anything
Okay.
for that security. This was my husband's scenario. My husband and Oswald are just two peas in a pod. Exactly the same personality, the same type, in the same elite group, I might add, which was doing work with communists and Russians, with Czechoslovakians and with Romanians. I met assassins, I met drug lords, Fahim Kordobawi, whose family were the drug lords.
You know, it's crazy that she's starting to talk about these recruiting young boys and the drug lords, because they just revealed it was a 15-year-old that shot the candidate for Colombian president recently.
Lords in the Bekaa Valley. I mean, he knows the elite of the elite of the elite, and that's why I was warned twice not to talk.
And you were warned,
I was told that I would be killed. I was told that
your
I would
husband
be-
warned you about this, or?
Oh, my husband warned me early on in it, but he knew that he loved me in the beginning. I'm sure he really did. But he's a robot, my husband, except when he's drinking. And I think that's why he drank, because the first 3 years of marriage, he was telling me everything. And I come from a very strong Protestant Southern culture, which, you know, when you're talking about shooting people like ducks, the only thing I can relate it to is my brothers going duck hunting, and that's what George would tell me it was like. Killing is just, you know, it's nothing. There's no emotion involved. You just get rid of somebody. And he said he was an existentialist and that these murders were necessary, and, you know, it very matter of fact. And I'd sort of go, yep, and we'd be eating dinner, and I was trying to get him to know Christ, you know, to sort of understand a little bit about my background. and America's background. But his group.
Yeah, I get that you assassinated world leaders, but have you read John 4?
They are not Christians. They're what he calls existentialist, and they study German Clausewitz and Nietzsche, Sartre, Camus, Montesquieu, and his thesis at Princeton, which was written for him by a very good friend of his named Todevay, who was a French count. And his thesis was on this. And it was, supposedly it was in French, but my French is better than his. So he could not have written that by himself. I know that. I know it was written for him. But in the intelligence world, and in the communist world, and the world that my husband was in, one had to know French because all of the terrorist trainers and the guys who were funding all the guerrillas and everything were in Paris and New Orleans. They would go back and forth. Still, the 4th Marines is out of New Orleans. And that's been going on a long time, ever since Disraeli. Even before, I think. But they had
Isn't the
hit squads
Boulay
and
Society out of New Orleans?
undercover groups in New Orleans. And George would go to New Orleans, all the Marines. I mean, this is where they train, do terrorist training, Lake Pontchartrain and places like that.
Okay, then this would be during the 1980s?
Yeah, 1980s.
Okay.
From the I think New Orleans has been a school for a place where debauchery and murder and cults and
Flourished.
yeah.
Well, there's a New Orleans connection with the JF Kennedy assassination.
Well, you see, Oswald, my husband and Oswald were in the same club. General Jim Joy is in that club. General Louis Buell, who is my husband's benefactor, or whatever you want to call it, is in that club. There is in fact, I've got the name of, there are Russians in that club.
Yeah, feel free to grab any reference materials
Yeah.
you've got. Her.
What I want to tell you about General Al Gray, my husband was the chief of staff for General Al Gray, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, and you all can get rid of it, but he's a homosexual.
Gray.
Gray.
Okay.
He's what they call a cherry Marine. Now, I'm not anti. I'm trying to find my. I hope I've got it. Yeah, here it is. The
Now, this
Vietnam
term cherry Marine,
Cherry
is that
Marine.
that's a common phrase in the military?
See, the thing is, they're guys and they're girls, and I just came from such a real prudish culture.
Yeah.
That's
fine. You came from a normal culture.
And I'm not judging them, but the Vietnam War, I know a lot about that, about the MAXOG program and the Phoenix program, because George was involved with a very important part of that. Not important really, but he and Al.
What if every war is just different mercenary groups afraid that the other country is going to tell their wife that they're gay?
Gray and Louis Buell and Michael O'Boyle and Ollie Whipple were. Do you remember the Manguez and the Pueblo? Was it the
the seizure of that little ship?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was. It's run by the mob. Then it was a mob military partnership, joint. It was a joint operation in Korea and in Vietnam. The highest levels of the Marine Corps and the Army, in those special operations levels, the individuals are actually in the mob. New
You're
Jersey.
talking about the mafia type mob?
I'm talking about the Brooklyn, New Jersey mob. My husband, Al Gray, Sheehan, they're all Brooklyn. Cap Weinberger. Heinz Kissinger, there's the Boston mob, which was shipping weapons back and forth to Northern Ireland. And I don't want to get too deeply involved in that, but it goes, Israel, some of the Zionists who came over from Germany, according to my husband, were, see, he works with those people. They do a lot of money laundering in the banks, cash transactions for the drugs that they're bringing over through Latin America, the Southern Mafia, the Dixie Mafia, which is now my husband's involved with in Miami. The military are all involved once they retire. They're, they go into this drug and...
I work with a guy that was one of the investigators that put away one of the famous cocaine cowboys, Murph the Surf. I've been trying to decide if I want to approach him to go and interview him about this. Maybe I have to clean up my channel before I go and bring him on, or just not show his face.
Secondary weapons sales. And before I forget, I want to find the name of this Russian who worked with Al Gray, who was my husband's boss, and trying to see where I wrote it. I may have to look and find that another.
It's no trouble at all. How are we doing over there, guys? Sound good? How much time is rolled on the clock? On your clock? You can speak. So
20 minutes.
20? Okay, good.
I can't find it right now. I'll find it.
Right.
The Vietnam was really important because a lot of experiments were done on boys who went over there.
Mm-hmm.
I had, since my husband disappeared,
Operation
and since
Phoenix.
they have been psychologically trying to destroy me, financially trying to destroy me, because I'm telling the truth. His first wife, I know, was murdered.
Okay.
She was, according to a psychiatrist whose name I probably won't give because he's an honorable man. I was given permission before I went public with Sarah McClendon at the press club anonymously, but they knew who I was on the 3rd of July, 1996, was when I came out with a small group of people. But before that time, they were trying to handle me, to try and get me to be quiet. They tried threatening me and so forth. And I'm trying to remember where I was, what I was going to, the point I was going to make. I can't remember now what I was going to. It was something important. Oh, yeah, General Jim Joy.
Yeah.
I called General Jim Joy on the phone. I was trying to find where my husband was because I didn't know whether I'd have any money to, food to eat or what. He just walked away, and I knew that the Marine Corps knew where he was. But I was being handled psychologically. On the 4th of March, my home was broken into. They had elaborate plans to handle me.
The 4th of March, 96?
1996.
96.
And keep in mind, he had disappeared on the 28th of December.
Of 96.
Of 96, 95.
Okay,
So put yourself in my shoes. I had no idea where he is. He's done this before, and each time I was totally traumatized. So I get,
What happened during this break-in?
well, they were looking for the diary, which I have here.
Okay.
I don't have the original copy, but this is the diary.
Okay, can you lift it up so
Yeah,
we can...
sure.
Yeah, just
This is it. It's his Beirut diary.
kind of hold those. So
Yeah. This is it.
Okay.
And it's in his handwriting. The Beirut diary tells how the intelligence community, the Army and Marine Corps assassins, snipers, are how they operate in a city during a crisis. My husband was the liaison between the White House and President Jamal. So my husband is a friend of Scrokoff, McFarland's a Marine. All of these men are personal friends of George's. Colby, I spoke with personally on the phone. 2 weeks later, he was murdered. He went to Princeton. My husband knew him. He knew my husband. He told me, Colby told me that...
Now, this is General Colby?
No, this is William Colby, who was head of the CIA.
Oh, okay, yes.
Who was murdered in a...
So-called boating
I
accident.
know exactly how that happened because, you see, the SEAL teams, SEAL Team 6, 4, 6, and 8 are on the East Coast, and then the odd numbers are on the West Coast. And some of the people who are affiliated with the SEALs, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say it. But
Well, it wouldn't be hard for a SEAL to come from underwater and tip the boat over and make sure the man's dead, that sort of thing?
the Israelis train with the SEALs. They do a lot of wet ops, murders,
Okay.
over here because of some sort of arrangement. The young boys, I met 3 young assassins on a bus, going up back and forth to Sarah's. I went on the bus because they were sabotaging my car so often. So I sat next to 2 young assassins, one from Romania, one from Haiti. And I let them know that I understand, how it is. And this little boy cried. I won't mention which one it was because it may get back to him. But he told me it was the same scenario. His mother, he lives on $850 a month. Now these are mercenaries.
Really makes you think about the Clinton Foundation scandal and all of that child trafficking.
Working, the taxpayers are paying mercenaries. The taxpayers are paying young men who are not citizens of the United States to kill innocent people, women and children. They get on a flight from Norfolk and Oceana. They fly to Stuttgart, and I was told this is what they do. Then they go by a special helicopter to countries like Turkey, like the part of Iraq, to Algeria, to parts of Africa, and they do wet ops. They'll just, murder 5, 10, 20 people. And then they blame it on the Arabs, or they blame it on somebody else. But it's actually NATO rogue assassins, because there are men from Australia, South Africa, Britain, that I've been able to determine, and a lot of these other little countries that are sort of wanting to get into NATO, they have little boys that they pick out, and they call them special. They use the word special, meaning elite, irregular, in order to entice these boys, because they don't have much ego, So if you call being a criminal, in other words, they are protected. They know that they are above the law. That's what my husband's above the law. Judge John Moore is above the law. Colonel Barry Cantor, my husband's JAG colonel lawyer, is above the law. Grover Wright, Marine Corps. A lot of these guys who were judges had their wives gotten rid of. Judge John Moore had his first wife thrown into a mental institution before he became a judge. He battered her. And I spoke with a man who has a Purple Heart, two people who knew Hannah very well. And Hannah Moore was deeply in love with her husband. He got back from Vietnam. He was an Army Ranger. He battered her. He physically and psychologically abused her. And she started screaming, doing because I was battered and bruised. A lot of wives are by these Vietnam vets. But if they're a colonel or if they're a rising star, the wife has got to be crazy because they've got too much invested in these men. And it's a very small cult. I mean, I have heard the things that they do when they're colonels. It's some of the same things that they do in Cap and Gown, which is the Princeton version of Skull and Bones. My husband went to Princeton after he went to the Hun School for 4 years.
Okay, now we should probably clarify a little bit about, you mentioned Skull and Bones, and many of the people wouldn't be familiar with that, and the Cap and Gown. So what are these clubs that these young inductees are pulled into, secret societies?
Secret societies. And
again, is this to make them feel super special?
Yes.
And also put a control on them
Yes.
so that you never tell these secrets?
Yes. That's it. You have got it.
I've heard a lot of child molesters. I mean, people who are not connected with the military, just plain old child molesters, will molest a child and then tell them, now if you ever tell, they'll take a cat and strangle it and kill it or something. This is what I'm going to do to your mother. This is what I'll do to you.
Yes.
Bad things will happen if you ever tell.
That's right.
And children grow up believing that I must never ever tell. And they don't, generally.
That's right.
Unless someone comes along to help them see the light and come out of it.
Yes.
And what happens is that you have the cover-up. There are so many stories where the story of this Satanism and this child abuse starts to come to light, and immediately the lid goes on because the system controls the various aspects that can keep the lid on. This is just one example. There's endless numbers around the world. The Franklin cover-up. It was an investigation by this guy, John W. DeCamp, who was former state senator in Nebraska, and he started investigating this guy, Lawrence King, a major Republican who sang the American national anthem in 1984 and 1988, I think it was, at the Republican convention. And he was investigating him for financial fraud through an organization called the Franklin Savings and Loans. But then he discovered that he's running a pedophile ring and providing children for the biggest names in America. And he wrote this book, The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, again, they go together all the time, and murder in Nebraska. And what happened? Some of it got into this Washington Times, a mainstream newspaper, the connection to the Reagan-Bush administration, but most of it was totally covered up. I've been writing in my books now since 1998 that Father George Bush is a notorious pedophile, child torturer, child killer, and serial killer of adults as well. Said it on American radio. Still waiting for a response. And this is one example. A lady who became a friend of mine, Kathy O'Brien, who was in the American government mind control project since she was a kid. And met her many times. She still corresponds with me now and again. And I've met a daughter that she was talking about. Lovely, lovely girl. Totally shattered by these people. And that's one example of millions and millions that are going on around the world. And this is what she said in a book, Transformation of America. Kelly's bleeding rectum was but one of many physical indicators of George Bush's paedophile perversions.
Jesus.
I've overheard him speak blatantly of his sexual abuse of
It's
her
like that
on
girl
many
on that
occasions.
movie
He used
said,
this in threats to her life
Poltergeist.
to pull my strings and control me. The psychological ramifications of being raped by a paedophile president are mind-shattering enough. But reportedly, Bush further reinforced the traumas to Kelly's mind with sophisticated NASA electronic and drug mind control devices. Bush also instilled the "who you gonna call and I'll be watching you" binds on Kelly, further reinforcing her state of helplessness. The systematic tortures and trauma that I endured as a child now seem trite by comparison. They're not. I know what she went through. To the brutal physical and psychological devastation that George...
If you're wondering what I was looking at, this fucking dolphin keeps splashing around me. So I was just trying to figure out what the fuck was going on.
George Bush inflicted on my daughter. And that's just one of these people involving one of the victims of this. It's incredible, the scale of it, and it's going on in this country. And what happens? The wall goes up. This is what DeCamp found. Suddenly ranks are pulled in, and the media won't touch it, the social services won't touch it, the police won't touch it, politicians won't touch it. It's the blueprint, it's how it works. And the Discovery Channel program, produced by Yorkshire Television, was about to go to air, exposing that Franklin cover-up and the paedophile connections. Bingo, it was censored and pulled just before it was going to air. Never to see the light of day, although you can get it on the internet, because one copy survived.
Okay, that tells you a little bit about cults and satanic cults and preschools. By the way, Dr. Roland Summit, psychiatrist at UCLA, has told me that he's also involved in these issues, that he has intelligence information and otherwise that there are more than 50 preschools around the country where they claim that there's been sexual ritual abuse, and tunnels are located under the schools, more than 50 of them. The McMartin family traveled all over the world because they were experts in putting preschools together, organizing them, showing them how to build the schools and so forth. There were more than 5,500 children went through this McMartin school from the time it was built in 1966 until 1983, when this incident was alleged to have taken place. The cults use these 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old children for several purposes. Number one, they use them for pornographic films. There's a lot of money, $10 billion a year, pornographic business in this country. They use them in their initiation. They consider them initiated into the cult, even though their parents don't know about it.
And who owns the porn companies?
As part of their ceremonies. In other words, they need children in certain ceremonies. Now, I've been told, well, now don't tell me the kids, if they witnessed a human sacrifice or the sacrifice of a baby, that they wouldn't go home and tell their parents about it. But I'll tell you what a little girl in the McMartin case told me. And she told her mother, and her mother told me. She told her mother that she witnessed these sacrifices, and that on one occasion, after her mother dropped her off in the morning and before the mother picked her up at night, she was taken to her bedroom, back to her home. They went into the house. They sexually molested her in the home, in the bedroom. They left a little token there. They took her little baby kitten, took the kitten into the school, and had a ceremony and sacrificed the kitten in front of her. Then they told the little girl, they said, if you talk to your mother or your father, we're going to do this to your mother, your father, and your little brother. Now, don't tell me that a kid's going to talk under those conditions. They're petrified. They also talked about men coming in and sexually molesting them dressed in police uniforms, dressed as Santa Claus, and so forth.
Jesus, buddy.
I'm sorry to say that the Bureau's changed. There's no question about it.
Pretty fucked.
The FBI today, in 1996, is being used by the politicians to further their gains and their goals. So, there are a few things that have happened to me, some major matters that have happened to me since my retirement. And most recently, I was giving a lecture in Las Vegas, and I sat at the head table next to a gentleman. And this gentleman in his day had been in naval intelligence, and he was telling me that on December the 4th, 1941, 3 days before Pearl Harbor, he was in the communications room in Washington, D.C., a naval intelligence officer, and we received, the U.S. government received a communication, an intercept of Japanese message that had been sent, and we had broken the Japanese code, and this message stated that we were going to bomb Pearl Harbor on December the 7th. He was very elated to have received this. He passed it up to his superior passed it on. After the war was over, he came back to Washington, D.C., and was told he was going to have to testify. They had a congressional hearing on this. He was given a subpoena. His boss called him in and said, even though you have a subpoena, you're not going to testify. And he said, well, I don't understand this. He says, look, you don't understand now, someday you will. You're not going to testify. And he didn't testify. Now, it's been documented, and I've heard it on a number of occasions, that we knew about Pearl Harbor in advance. This is the first time I've had information directly.
I thought it was
from
that they saw the
a person
submarines.
who was aware of this. I also received some information recently in my tours and lectures and what have you. I did a TV show in Long Beach, California. One of the gentlemen involved in the show was in the U.S. Army at one time. He told me that in the spring of 1973, we had bombed all of the North Vietnamese supply lines. We had mined their harbors. They were cut off. And one of his associates was in the communication room in Saigon. And this is, of course, a classified job. And when he was in this room, he received this message from the North Vietnamese. We surrender.
You know, that made me think about how it's kind of funny that North Korea is always lobbing missiles over Japan. They literally have a nuclear weapon, and they still go after Iran. Like, Iran's been on the verge of having nuclear weapons for, what, 30 years, supposedly? And then the guy that just keeps lobbing nuclear weapons over like an ally of ours, we just kind of just like, hey, knock it off, buddy. All right, all right. Hey, are you doing it again?
Unconditionally. He passed it on to his superiors, and all Army personnel were immediately ushered out and replaced by State Department personnel. It was shortly thereafter that Kissinger met with the North Vietnamese officials in Paris, France. Why do these things happen? Why did we not take advantage of the advance notice of Pearl Harbor? And why is it necessary for us to be a subservient to North Vietnam when we obviously have won? I think at the end of this lecture, you may have the answer.
All that
In fact,
news
I'm sure you'll
about
have the answer.
South
I think you'll
Korea's
understand much better than you do
leader
have
declaring
in recent
martial
years.
law.
And you see, my
Kinda went
husband
over
is
and
frightened to
disappeared.
death. I believe that his brother was murdered to keep him in, because he had gone through 4 years of this mind control. And the man who did it, you can see this on the video, his name was Charles Caddock, and another man named Alexander Robinson.
Okay, Charles Caddock.
Caddock.
And the other one?
Alexander Robinson. Alexander Robinson was a Marine, very well-connected Presbyterian family, whose family member was the influential one who brought over the Saudis. The original Saudi head of Saudi Arabia was George told me all this about Mohammed Faisal, Khalid Faisal, and Saud Faisal, and there were something like 32 brothers of the then in the mid-50s, the ordained, whoever was head of Saudi Arabia. It was actually the United States who chose that person, because the United States, through Charles Caddock and that group, murdered the good one, the one whom everybody liked, who was well educated, and who was normal. In, I believe it was 1952, 1953, 1954, in Paris, the universal Saudi, the well-educated Saudi, was poisoned.
And what would his name
Charles Caddock.
I don't suppose it's all that important, but anyway.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Fahim, or he died in Paris, and so his brother, his half-brother or whatever, was the father of all these 32 boys, and the 3 oldest now were snuck into the United States. I have a degree in history, Virginia history, undergraduate degree, and master's in Scottish history. And being a Southerner, we always look at, past as prologue. And I jumped into the Saudi Arabian books to try and find out something about the Hun School, which is in Princeton, started by a physicist connected with Einstein in that group. So I was looking for the Hun School because I knew they went there. And they're in all the brochures. They're very proud to say, we have the Saudi royals went here. President Cheeseborough brags about going over there and being wined and dined, and So I only found one reference, but it was a reference that said something like they went to a prep school in the United States. That's all they said. Well, it was the Hun School, and my husband was one of the playmates. Charles Caddock was the bodyguard, quote-unquote teacher for these guys. So they would go out and play in the woods, and they were doing homosexual things with them. There was a lot of money. They bought a big house.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, now, I was momentarily distracted.
Okay.
Explain to me a little bit about this, the homosexual event here.
Well, George, for the first 3 years of our marriage, was drinking entirely too much. And he was trying to let me know about his world. And I'm not judging him. He's a bisexual.
Okay. And he
believe.
needed help.
He needed help, he needed love, he
does.
needed cry. He
Yeah.
still does. He really needs help. And the handlers knew that I was changing him. I was taking him away from this crazy
Worse.
cult
Right.
that he'd been in all these years. And we were going to church. He even walked down the aisle one time when Tony Evans preached at Scope. He was overwhelmed. And
At Scope. No,
at Scope in Norfolk, it's a big auditorium.
Okay.
And so, but he was a little boy when he was, it's mind control. MK Ultra, somebody said. They had a group of men, psychiatrists in New Jersey. I don't know where this place was, but they would go, and even his roommates in Princeton told me about it. George never, intentionally, he never introduced me to any of his friends. So I had to cold call all these people. I got their names and addresses, telephone numbers. I called all these roommates at the Hun School and at Princeton. They told me things about George and, holding hands with, with Caddock and other people, about being a cheerleader and going off and so forth.
Now, a cheerleader, this is a kind of a trade name, right?
No, he was a cheerleader for the
At Princeton.
At Princeton. And he
Okay.
traveled with the football team.
Okay.
And here is a guy like that. They put him in the Marine Corps. I don't think that was very nice. Do you know what I'm saying? It was hard for him. But
But it was part of the long-term vision.
Absolutely. They wanted him long term. And it's because of the Saudis. This is what I believe and what his roommate believes. He had a roommate at Princeton who was also at the Hun, who's a dear, dear, wonderful. His mother is an Anglican. His father was a Jewish doctor from Brooklyn, and Jack is a dear. And we talk to each other a lot on the phone. George sort of, dismissed him because George was getting in with another crowd. George got into Cap and Gown, which is the same kind of fraternity. I mean, it's an eating club at Princeton for intelligence officers.
It's Cap and Gown. Would they have anybody involved that wasn't intelligence oriented?
Football players and so forth. But I have a feeling that Cap and Gown has a lot of intelligence officers and boys who may have been raped. Of course, they'd never talk about it.
Right.
But I know that the initiation is, they get very drunk, and even in the Marine Corps they do that. It's called dining in. They have the shellback ceremony. They do a lot of homosexual enticement. The boys are, when they come in, when they're new recruits, they strip them nude, they violate their personal parts. There's a lot of that is going on.
What about
even now?
Tailhook?
Yeah.
Is there a connection?
Yeah, sure, because the cream of the crop is doing this. They're having group sex parties.
And that was a Navy operation too, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the Navy and the Marine Corps.
Of course not. Maybe we ought to, for those
That's another.
that tailhook, they don't know anything about. Tailhook was refresh our memories.
Well, tailhook. In fact, I when I was single in Norfolk, I know one of the people who was deeply involved with tailhook, who was the captain of the Saratoga, was very much involved with this kind of behavior. I know a lot about I never thought about group sex. This is so awful for me to contemplate that these orgies are going on all over the Mediterranean, that the captains, lieutenants, the men who rise to the top are the ones who are picked to play the games, the pool parties, the nude pool parties. And they have secretaries who come in. I've talked to 3 guys, and of course my husband, who went to these parties. But what they do is, and this is General Al Gray, who was the main prime mover, they would go to a place like Aix-les-Rosés, where Charles Caddock, this teacher who got my husband into it, he retired in one of these all-male party houses on the Mediterranean. I mean, that's where and my husband kept up with him all through the years.
But these sex parties and orgies, they're all homosexual in nature, or
well,
is there some heterosexual?
They start off with the wild secretaries. It's kind of, my husband did those in Indonesia. He did them at a place in Northern Virginia with his first wife. I did not know any of this. I knew absolutely none of this when I married him. He told me he was loyal to his wife. He wanted me to think he was just apple pie, because I'm just a one-man woman.
Right.
When I took that oath to marry him,
right,
love, honor, and obey, that's me. But he, when he was married to his first wife, was just an addict. He was a sexual addict, an alcoholic addict. He loves, terror, and his whole little soul was just being sucked away from him desperately. And he needs Christ. He needed me day in and day out. He did not need to be. What he's doing now is running more of these operations.
As you describe this, I can't help but think of Bill Clinton.
Well, of course he was. He was one of those profile boys.
Uh-huh.
But the difference between Bill Clinton, and I'm not saying Bill Clinton's better, but Bill Clinton did not go, he didn't know anything about the assassinations. Bill Clinton, when I was living with Sarah McClendon, the senior White House correspondent who saved my life, because she said, Mrs. Griggs,
All right.
you get up here to Washington right
That's a
now,
good place
or
to
you're
stop.
dead. You're going to be dead.
I'm getting
And I
bit up
still
to
feel
hell
as though
with these
I
fucking
probably will
goddamn
be.
mosquitoes.
Um,
So
I'll certainly be
try to
financially
do
ruined.
something maybe
They are
tomorrow or
still
Monday.
doing
Have a
psychological
good night.
operations in my home.